Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Chaffe, and welcome to Perception Paradox. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox and one more inspiring episode. And today on our show we have a very special guest, Michael Chatte of Wolf Summit, a premier tech and innovation conference in Central and Eastern Europe, who is now working with a global corporate venturing as they expand to the sea and the new Nordics. Michael's journey is as unconventional as it gets, transitioning from the depths of the oil and gas sector as a saturation diver to the vibrant world of venture capital and innovation. We're gonna cover a lot, but the focus will be on how to really maybe get that product out, about the resilience, about the founder's mindset, about the growth, all the topics we enjoy lately. So welcome, Michael. It's such a big pleasure to have you on the show.
Hi, thanks for the invitation, Zavil, and really happy to be here this morning with you. Looking forward to a great podcast.
Yay, I'm happy that you're here. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. So as I mentioned to you, I've just arrived back from my morning training. So it's been tough last few months, but I've eventually, 2 weeks ago, dragged myself out of the laying in bed in the mornings and get into the local CrossFit box. And I can tell you I feel miles better for it.
Nice. I'm really glad to hear it. I think the best thing is to actually start your day grounding yourself with an activity or ritual, as I like to say, that kind of fulfills you. So I'm glad that you actually got back to that as well. That's very nice. So Michael and I, we met at Mobile World Congress in February a few months back. And it was just like so random. I was about to leave and then he enters with a shared friend of ours. And then I bring them to our shared friends because I'm like, okay, I'm going to just have a quick chat. And then out of the blue, we've noticed that we share the same topics. And then I've get to know his involvement in the startup scene and the whole ecosystem. I'm like, I've heard rumors about you and we haven't met yet. And here we are right now in the podcast, which is very great to have a space and time to have this conversation. So thank you, Mike, for joining me today. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, really, it's my pleasure, Zavil. And it was actually the 4 years from now, 10th year anniversary party, wasn't it?
That's true.
In that really glam, I'm not sure what the name was, but it was really like going back in time, you know, with the dance floor downstairs and then the tapestry all around the upper floor. It felt almost like an opera hall.
Yeah, for me, like, it's literally going back in time. This whole venue was just super impressive. Like, I think the only thing we were missing, like, those posh dance ball dresses, and that's it. We're good to go. But yeah, that's correct. It was 4 years from now. Since it was my first 4 years from now, first Mobile World Congress, I'm still mixing up because they were communicated as one piece, even though I know that these are two separate ones. But
yeah, mine too. Actually, it's my first
really?
Mobile World Congress. Yeah.
Cool. So that's great because I think we're as young as we get like new adventures and new first times. So that's really, really awesome. So clearly I didn't know you that well. We had a couple of calls and got to know each other, especially about this kind of mindful journey. And but there was one thing I kind of discovered while a bit looking into this episode. What we talk about is your previous experience that you spent over a decade in the oil and gas sector, specializing in the deep sea operations as a saturation diver and working at depths of up to 250 meters subsea. Can you share with us more? What? How? Why?
So yeah, basically the how I got into saturation diving. I was in my early 20s and I went on a 9-month around the world backpacking trip. So I went from London to Oslo, took a flight, and that was the only flight I would take until coming back from Singapore 9 months later. So I went from Oslo to Stockholm, over to Tallinn on the craziest ferry I've ever been on my life.
Why was that craziest ferry? Please tell me.
There was fights on the dance floor. There was people making out. It was gallons and gallons of vodka. And we arrived into the Tallinn ferry port, and I'd befriended an Estonian guy and his partner, and he was super wasted. He's like, I can drive you, don't worry. So we get into his Audi TT, and he drives me to the backpacking hostel where I'd booked a room to stay at. And this was like super bohemian, run by some Australian hippies that had basically made Estonia and Tallinn their home. So I stayed there a couple of nights, did the sightseeing, loved the culture, and then took a train. So I started the Trans-Siberian journey from Tallinn, went to St. Petersburg, spent like a week there, then to Moscow, then to Nizhny Novgorod, and then the rest of the Siberian cities, all the way down to Irkutsk. So it was actually coming up. It was October, November. I forget what year it was, maybe 2006. So I got to Irkutsk and went on this trip to Lake Baikal, and I basically lived with all of these natives. I think they were a religious community, but they did, their income was from tourism, etc. So I spent probably 5 days in a wooden hut on the banks of Lake Baikal. Had an amazing experience. Seeing how this community lived was just mind-boggling. Completely unmaterialistic. Waking up before sunrise, tending to their animals, and then that was their life. That was their life day in, day out. So from there, I went back to Irkutsk and then down to Ulaanbaatar, and I spent a month. And this was in the middle of winter, so it was absolutely...
I was about to ask, was it in winter? Like, it must have been freezing.
It was freezing, and it was like minus 40 at night. And
oh my God.
We had one of these like old Soviet 4x4 trucks with about 8 of us, so Westerners, some guys from New Zealand, a girl from Denmark, a couple of Brits along with me, and we went all around the Gobi Desert. And we spent a month in the desert, and at night we would find nomads who were camped in different parts of the desert, and we would stay inside their Mongolian yurt. We'd stay inside the yurt overnight, and these things, even with minus 40 outside, the fire in the middle just kept the thing like an oven. And they'd cook like lamb and sheep directly from their livestock the animals that were surrounding their camp. So it was like really surreal watching the animal being like cooked in front of you. But it tasted
and you've
delicious.
never seen that before? You've never seen that before?
Never seen that before. And then I remember wrestling with the young Mongolian kids. So wrestling is a big part of their culture. And obviously all of these big Westerners, the young Mongolian kids wanted to show their strength, so it was all good fun, and we'd find ourselves wrestling outside in the mud. And that was like a month. Did my first ice bath experience. So there was a lake which was frozen over, and the hosts of the trip, they took us to the lake, cut a hole in the ice with an axe, and I jumped in, and it was, as you can imagine, utterly freezing. So literally, and the funniest thing was I couldn't get back out because I had 3 people trying to pull me out and they were slipping over. So I was in this lake for about 3 minutes in the end.
Okay.
Eventually got out and just went straight back to the yurt, sat next to the fire and warmed up.
Oh my God.
So yeah, really great experience. And then down from Ulaanbaatar, I went down to Beijing, did the Great Wall of China. It was the same time that the football stadiums were being built. So that was really interesting to see all of that going on. And then I took the train down through China, ended up in Hong Kong, and then went over to Macau, and then traversed Southeast Asia into Thailand. So first time in Asia and first time in Thailand. And there I spent like a very brief amount of time in Bangkok. And then I went down to Phuket, so the island on the south. And at the time, I was like hugely overweight. I was about 130 kilos or even more. Yeah, so this backpacking trip was a way for me to like reset bad habits that I'd fallen into in the UK. So I got to this boxing camp, and I was about halfway through the 9 months. So it was 4.5 months into the trip. And I checked into this Muay Thai boxing camp, and I literally, morning and night, that was my routine. So I'd wake up, 12K run, hit the pads for like an hour or 2 hours, sleep during the day, 3 p.m, go out for an 8K run, and then do some sparring and more pad work in the afternoon. And I did that for 4.5 months. And when I left the boxing camp, I'd gone from 130 kilos down to 82. Okay.
Wow, from zero to hero.
Yeah, and I literally I went from Phuket down through Malaysia to Georgetown, checked out Kuala Lumpur, and then spent a very 5 or 6 days in Singapore before flying back to the UK. And I remember to this day when I landed and came through security control, met some friends who were waiting for me, and they didn't recognise me because I.
Oh my goodness!
I was a shadow of the guy that had travelled. So now connecting that with my career in offshore diving, during the period that I was in the boxing camp, there were lots of British, American, and Australian guys who were divers. So they'd cruise around on these like expensive motorcycles, and they'd tell me all these stories about the lifestyle. You know, fast, huge amount of money you could earn in a short space of time, and then spend 2 months partying or just relaxing on a beach in Thailand. So I was like, wow, like early 20s, just enamored with this dream life. So as soon as I got back from Singapore, I went to Scotland, trained to be a commercial diver, and then after completing the diving course, went back to Singapore to try and get a first job. Which wasn't easy. In the end, I found a job in Dubai. It wasn't the most well-paid job at the time, but I was new to the industry and I needed to learn the ropes. So that was how I got into diving. And then 4 years as a standard air diver. So basically, that allows you to go to 50 meters just breathing a mixture of normal air like we breathe now. And I did that for like 4 years, then went to Marseille in France and did it's what's called the saturation ticket. So that's where you can go down to 250 meters, or in Brazil, there's guys going to 400 meters, but
400 meters?
Yeah.
How long does it take to go down to the 400 meters? That's insane.
So the going down's not such a problem. It can be, I think, 72 hours to go to 400 meters, but coming up would require 14 to 20 days from that depth to decompress. So during that whole period, you're breathing a mixture of helium and oxygen, and helium is a much lighter gas than nitrogen, what we breathe now. So the helium takes much longer to dissipate from your tissue. So that's why it takes so long. So for that whole period, you're inside a metal, basically think of a giant Coke can that's pressurized to the depth that you're working at. And then every day when there's a change of team going to the work site on the seabed, this pressurized bell connects to the living chamber. You go into the bell, go down to the job, and then you come back 8 hours later.
Wow, that's insane. So you basically live underwater?
You live at pressure. So over the course of 11 years in the industry, I spent around 3 years inside a pressurized Coke can with 8 other guys in very, very close proximity.
How does it feel? How was your first expedition to that?
Like the first job that I did in saturation was offshore of Iraq. So just after the war ended, there was the Basra gas pipelines, which had all been damaged on the seabed. So we went in, and it was my first, as I said, first saturation job. So we went in and we were reinstalling these huge gas pipelines, 46-inch diameter. And what we would do, and it was thick mud. So on the seabed, there was so much mud that as soon as you landed, the mud would kick up and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. All of the time it was like moving very slowly, navigating by your hands and touching and feeling the infrastructure. And we would land these huge pipelines and then connect them to existing pipelines that were on the seabed. And then each of the flanges, they're called, it's like the place where the two faces meet together. There's between 16 to 20 bolts around the circumference. So Each one of those bolts was around 40 kilos. As the new guy and without experience, I was just responsible for picking up the bolt from 20 meters away, bringing it in my arms to the guy who was working on the flange face, and then we would put the bolts in and use hydraulic pressurized equipment called hydrotight. So we would use that equipment to connect the two faces together, and then there would be a firm seal, and after we'd finished our job they could pump gas down the line.
That's super interesting, and they're in familiar environment, but it also kind of sounds super challenging in a way. You are in a limited space, limited amount of people. You have to be very precise and disciplined. It's kind of a high risk, high reward game. How, during those 10, 11 years in this industry, how did it affect who you are today, actually? Because you have to be very strong within your mind and choices, right? And anything can go wrong.
It's a strange one. Like I remember my first time going to sea was in Dubai, and I was away from civilization, so to speak, for 126 days. So over 4 months, and you just get into a routine of like Clockwork Orange. So every morning you wake up at the same time. I would go to the gym before shift. So there's no like 5-day work week offshore. It's 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for the duration of the job. You just get into this very efficient routine of waking up, training, eating breakfast, checking into the workstation. A lot of the time there'll be bad weather, so you can't do any work until the waves come down to a reasonable height. So a good 60 to 70% of your time offshore, you're just watching movies in the recreation room or playing ping pong in the recreation room. Yeah, I mean, it's actually, life is so easy in the offshore industry.
No problems.
Honestly, it's like to be an entrepreneur, it's night and day. So that was the big learning I had when I eventually left the industry and got into entrepreneurship, just how bloody difficult it is.
How did that transition happen? That's a very interesting one, right? And maybe before we go into the transition, what did you want to do with your life before going on that trip where you met other divers?
Before I went backpacking, I was going nowhere, really. I was just lost, and I had this urge just to see the world. Just throw a bag on my back and just jump on a flight and see where I ended up. I think at some point in our lives, at around that age, we have a strong motivation to sort of find ourselves. And for me, that was making that journey was certainly that moment. So up until then, I was just bouncing around London, doing odd jobs on building sites, scaffolding. I was a motorcycle courier for some time. That was really crazy, interesting and fun. So zipping around London, picking up what was quite common. There was lots of modelling agencies in Covent Garden, and they would do all of these glitzy photo shoots out in East London or elsewhere in the city.
Yeah.
And I'd go there, collect the photo prints live from the photographer, bring them back to the agency, and they would then process them.
So you've done a lot, and then, you're going to go backpacking. Was it difficult just to zoom out and go on such a trip alone? Because sometimes I experience by talking with people, they really want it, but the fear to go on such a trip, which is also a lot about uncertainty, nothing is clear. You lose kind of control of things because you always end up in a new environment and it's changing. How comes your curiosity and courage was larger than the fear?
Yeah, it was. Before I went, I was obviously worried about, I'll be on my own. It's, no friends around. But the one thing I would say to anybody that's considering an extended trip backpacking or, some similar format is to go alone, because you meet so many people. When you're on your own and you turn up at a backpacking hostel, everybody's your friend within minutes. So it's a really great way. I know that you travel a lot, Seville, so
I love solo traveling. It's and it's not only for backpacking, and I think one of the interesting things, we're now talking about a bit your younger age, but we also touched base on that before, that backpacking is not just for the youth or undergrads or something. It's just for everyone. It's just journey solo. If you travel with friends and family, it's great, but it's traveling and deepening the relationships with your environment rather than actually going fully to immerse yourself into the culture, which is what I find when you're solo traveling. It's a huge kind of space for yourself to go within and also to really immerse into the culture. So I think there is no age for that. You can do it when you're 20, you can do it when you're 60, it doesn't matter. So I'm a huge advocate for that. I think it can be life-changing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's really special, and I met friends on that trip that I'm still in touch with until today. So
I met some pretty cool people on my road trips as well, and where we met each other for like very brief time on some kind of adventurous thing. And at the end of the day, that's how you clearly see who the person is when you're on an adventure and things go wrong. And you're like,
exactly.
oh, okay, that's how he reacts, you know? So I really like people with whom I work to go on trips. If I want to continue long partnership collaboration, it just makes it easier.
Absolutely. And I think the best way to, if you're considering getting married, then going on a 6-month backpacking trip with your fiance, you'll either be getting married or you won't be proceeding with it.
That's a good one. All right, we've covered backpacking. We've covered your very interesting start of the career in the oil and gas sector. Did you enjoy a lot of time in the beach in Thailand after when you got into this industry?
Oh, huge amounts. So I'd spend so much time on Koh Tao, Koh Phangan.
Of course.
There's a mad spiritual community on Koh Phangan.
Oh, yeah.
So I had some really great times there. And then also in Vietnam. So the good thing when you're in Asia, literally Kuala Lumpur can take you to every place in the region. So it was a great place to bounce around to different destinations in Southeast Asia.
Amazing. Okay, that's amazing. But now I'm very curious to learn. So how did that transition happening? How did you end up in the entrepreneurial world? And was it you wake up one day and you're like, I think this is it? Or it's also you met some people who shared their stories and...
Yeah, so it was actually the drive, the catalyst to get out of the oil and gas industry was my son, who's going to be 6 in like 2 weeks. And the reason was that I have an 11-year-old daughter as well. And when she was born just after my first saturation project in Iraq, and I bought the house without seeing it from like 60 meters pressurized in a chamber.
Okay.
So this was a house in Poland. And what happened, I missed so much of her growing up because I was recently qualified as a saturation diver. The money was amazing. So I just wanted to go and earn money, have a lavish lifestyle, etc. And the cost of that was that I missed a great deal of my daughter's younger years. So some years I would be at home for just 4 or 5 months. And with my son, I don't do that anymore. And I didn't want to lose his, the best years of his life. I made a decision that I was going to exit the industry. And at the time, I was living in Wrocław, where I've lived the whole time. And an English friend was working for a UK angel investment syndicate. And he was essentially the head of investor relations. And he said, look, why don't you give investor relations a crack? So he's like, come to the office. So we've got an office on the outskirts of town. It's beautiful. So I turn up at the office and it's a disused tram station, right? And it's like 1970s disused railway tram station. And me and my friend, his name was Jack, and we would sit and just contact with British angel investors, high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals, as well as various other organisations. And we would help the founders close their pre-seed and seed stage rounds. Typically, £250,000 to £2 million max were the ticket sizes. And I found a knack for it. Had really easy conversations and found closing the rounds super easy for the founders. So I was looking around. I was attending a lot of events in Poland, especially, and Central and Eastern Europe. Saw the huge technical prowess and the skill sets that the founders in our region possess, and then compared that to a startup who I'd recently helped raise £500,000, who was basically developed innovative insole, so something that goes in your shoe, and had no problems raising the money, whereas a technical founder in Poland couldn't even raise €10,000. And there was such a huge disconnect between the East versus West, if you will, that I was like, right, we can become a bridge. You know, I can bring the UK angel investment community into Poland and Central and Eastern Europe, and it can really pay dividends for both sides. So I approached the founders at the time of Wolf Summit, so Piotr and Basia Piasek, husband and wife, found a team, plus Piotr's brother. They'd done an amazing job up until then, growing the event from like 200 people as a first event in Gdynia up to 2,500-3,000 at the Palace of Culture and Science in Warsaw.
Yeah.
So I tried to broach a JV format with them, but what ended up happening is that myself and some investors bought the conference from Piotr and Basia. They still remained with some minority shareholding, and yeah, we essentially bought the conference in July 2019, and we organised the first conference as the new management team in October of 2019. It was difficult. It was like a real baptism of fire. Thankfully, we had an amazing organisational and logistical team from Wrocław. So some professors from the Politechnica University. She brought in lots of her colleagues, and it just went. You know, they did such a spectacular job. They didn't get much sleep. I mean, none of us did. I remember...
It's tech events. Come on, whoever does.
Yeah, I remember the first, on the preparation night, Patricia, who was the woman that I mentioned, and Alicia, I left them about 3 a.m. to get a few hours sleep, came back at 6 or 7, and they hadn't slept. I'm like, did you sleep? And they're like, no. And they were like, eyes red, and they just powered through the whole day. And it was a real impressive achievement as a new management team hosting a large scale conference with zero experience.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so it was rewarding. And then obviously we were on fire, preparing for March 2020. The event was like 40% year-on-year growth since from the October edition, and then COVID struck, and it was like 8 days before the conference was due to happen in Warsaw.
I think that was the one I had to attend. Sorry for interrupting. Sure, I do recall the last one I attended was Tech Chill before everything shut down, and it was funny enough the first one after COVID. I attended also Tech Chill.
Okay.
But
so
yeah, and then I could not come. Yeah, it's really a shame.
So we managed to, 8 days away from the conference, when the Polish government had banned mass gatherings in line with COVID regulations. So we pivoted to a virtual event, and we fell upon the Hopin platform. This was the time when Johnny had like 6 team members, and I would literally reach out to him on WhatsApp and say, Johnny, how does this work? What do we do here? So obviously we all know what happened to Hopin. They blew up and became the market leader. So what happened to us, we became a preferred like service provider for Hopin's clients. So that whole period of 2020 and 2021, we only survived as a business thanks to Hopin's rocket ship growth trajectory. So we serviced various clients, big public organisations like United Nations Development Programme. We did the Vienna Energy Forum in a hybrid format in 2021. Panasonic, LG, Economic Development Board of Singapore. It was an amazing amazingly challenging but rewarding two-year experience. So we did all that, became a virtual event agent in our own right, and then around halfway through 2021, I had an amazing individual called Diana Floresu. She'd be with me and the team for a few months, and she had a very strong corporate innovation background. She brought all of that experience to the table, and she was like, look, why don't we've become a virtual event specialist, why don't we get into government and corporate innovation programs? So off the back of that, she launched the Wolf Sex initiative, and then we went on to work with the likes of PwC, more projects with the Singaporean, with the Economic Development Board, and then lots of other corporations, some grant programs with the Visegrad Fund, as well as with the EU with the Commission. So it snowballed into all of a sudden we had a Wolf Summit event, flagship events in our own right. We had Wolf's Digital, which was our virtual events as a service platform, and then we had Wolfsex doing corporate and government innovation challenges. So it was like, and I wish I could say it was everything was like strategically planned, but it wasn't. It was literally just walking through those months, and things would just hit us in the face. It was a lot of luck and a lot of goodwill from partners, and the brand continued all the way through until last year, basically flipping between the three business lines that we offered.
Sounds a lot like a serendipity, you know? It's just like when you open up with things and then you go, then you out there perform, do things just comes also your way, and that helps you grow. So for me, it sounds really a lot like that.
It was like a huge amount of resilience and hard work from everyone in the team. There were single parents, there were students, part of the Wolf Summit team, and all of them would like put their heart and soul into the project. So we wouldn't have got through the COVID period and the years after without all of that hard work from everybody.
But that's very unique in a way to have such a great team. Where do you think that resilience is coming from? Is it from leadership, or is it from the way you gathered people together?
I mean, I like to think, and I know deep down that my approach to work, and my approach to how I manage myself was a positive, that's for sure, and that was in thanks to the hard, tough years I had in the oil and gas industry. So the long hours and round the clock working schedule was nothing new to me. But to be honest with you, a lot of the individuals in the team during the COVID period, their energy was just, I couldn't match it. Like it was like superhuman in some cases.
Okay, that's great. And I'm very interested to ask you, you've been changing, let's say, the careers a bit from oil and gas to investments, to startups, being kind of a founder yourself, then innovation, etc. What is your relationship with imposter syndrome?
It's a good point, because I think I would hazard a guess that nearly every entrepreneur at some point has encountered imposter syndrome, and it's really unpleasant, because even though you have the material, you have the evidence that what you've achieved as a business and as an individual, but when the imposter syndrome bites, there's no amount of history or kind words from people that can convince you that it's all false, because when you're in the depths of burnout or depression, even though you know deep down that what people are telling you is authentic and they wish the best for you, you've convinced yourself that they're just being nice. They don't know, they don't mean that. It's a really dark and vicious cycle.
Have you ever been yourself in this cycle of kind of burning out? Because all the experiences you've just shared with us, they require a lot of energy and they require a lot of time commitment, which is not the regular 9 to 5. And then also you mentioned you have a family, so it's kind of, how was it for you?
So it was incredibly difficult. And it was coming, when you talk about if I go back to my time in diving as a saturation diver, when you've overworked yourself, so some years I would do 7 or 8 months away, and by the end of those last jobs, you'd be in such a position that you wouldn't be speaking with your friends on the vessel because you're burnt out, you've got imposter syndrome. You might generally, when the imposter syndrome strikes, you start messing up a lot more. So I'd be on the seabed and I'd lose tools, for example, or I'd mess up a job, and you'd be like, everything, you'd just be killing yourself inside because the littlest things can seem like the end of the world. And that was the same, when I left the oil and gas industry, especially when I was new to events, there was like a element of not being able to sleep because you're worried about, oh, is everything prepared for tomorrow? Have we sent that email? Oh, there's a technical mishap, and you feel like everything's your responsibility. And that's something that I suffer with hugely. I'm better at it now, but in those early days of organising Wolf Summit, the ability to delegate properly and not be super worried about all of the different things that can go wrong was a huge struggle. So I was in 2020 after COVID struck. That was the most difficult period up until last year, but I'll get to that in a second. So mid 2020, I was at the point where I wasn't sleeping. I started with melatonin and to help with sleep, ended up on super strength pharmaceutical, sleeping tablets. But after some time, the one thing I would say to any founders who are burning out, don't go down the route of sleeping tablets, because you end up in a really vicious cycle. Because yes, they can give you a great short-term, much-needed relief, but after a few weeks or a month, they lose their effectiveness, and then you're in an even worse situation where you can't sleep, but you've taken these sleeping tablets, and it's hell. So what I found actually that was a huge life-changing practice, I started taking psilocybin mushrooms. So I think in May
you just started that out of the blue? Sorry for interrupting. Was it just, oh, okay, it's not working, I don't want to be on the pill, so I'm just gonna go to psilocybin mushrooms?
No,
or you had someone in your environment and you were digging into that?
Yeah, I had somebody in my environment who was into psychedelics and mushrooms especially, and I was also reading all of the pioneering white papers and research going on around the psychedelic renaissance. And I was like, I tried mushrooms in Koh Phangan when I was in many years earlier, but that was at a party, watching the sun come up and having this spiritual moment. But in 2020, when I started formally using psilocybin or LSD regularly, I approached it like going to the gym or training for a competition, because it very much is, when I go out to the forest or to the Czech mountain ranges with the intention of completely disconnecting for a day or two, I'll generally take the psilocybin at 10 a.m. and then just completely disconnect in nature for 6-7 hours. Oftentimes now, it didn't happen the first few times, but now when I do these journeys, I will 9 times out of 10 I'll have a huge cathartic release. So all of the stress and anxiety and all of that pain that is inside, it will just come flooding out. And it's the most beautiful experience I could ever imagine. Just that, all the tension, the person, me, that comes back from those trips to the mountains, like short of a nuclear bomb going off next to me, there's not much that would upset me. I'm that chill. It's like,
okay,
and then
you're super zen.
Super zen. And then you come back Monday to work, and then you've got like this energy and this patience, and you're sleeping like a baby.
Oh, yeah.
with no outside help from any pharmaceutical, etc. So it's a game changer.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And are you doing that alone, or do you have some therapist or some friends?
So I normally do it, I've been doing it alone quite a few times, probably 50-50. You need to be really comfortable with somebody. If you're I've done a few experiences where I've like been with a friend who wanted to try it for their first time, and it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, and you never know in what kind of relationship you are within yourself, because from all the research and so on, the psychedelics, it brings out what's hiding within you, and it can be either positive or negative, something you don't want to address, and it can be quite a journey. So yeah, interesting. And how do you feel when you go back to your regular environment after your kind of nature time? Because you become very open, you become also more sensitive, you're open up for the world, and then you come back to a regular different energy and different pendulum with a very like harsh rock and roll, I don't know, like hustling environment.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. Yeah, I would say that I personally come back more cynical, but not in like a negative way, but just in a like, really, are we, like there's all of this shit going on, and you've just come back from this complete detox and chilled, and then it's back into the furnace, so to speak. So that was quite a hard transition. That is quite a hard transition, because they're such polar opposites between, especially in the venture market at the moment. It's, as we all know, founders are having a very hard time. So are investors, and you come back from I come back from trip to the mountains, chilled and zen, and then you have to jump into this hamster wheel again. Yeah, you have to get into it and keep the thing spinning.
Yeah. Wow. Talking about founders. And you mentioned some problems happening right now in the market, and you've been working with so many founders. What are the common problems right now founders do face?
I hear it personally. Obviously, I've told you personally, Seville, but I also had this dynamic, basically, between me, the business, and our investor. We hit a crossroads and got head to head in a very bitter dispute, which is unfortunately going through the Polish legal system at the moment. So I think that a lot of founders are encountering the dark side of entrepreneurship, as the market has become so challenging. Expectations from the investors' side often don't reflect, aren't based on the reality of the market. And then 9 times out of 10, the founder is the one that is going to take the flack for all of this. So I've heard a lot of horror stories of down rounds, massive dilutions, takeovers, etc. And it's not pretty. Although what I would say from my own experience as well, there's never like one party is to blame. That's life. Life just doesn't happen like that. I look back on the dynamic that I had with our own investor, and there were moments where we could have avoided this car crash that we're in now. But it's all about communication. It really is like getting into a marriage when you take investment, especially angel investment, because this is their capital. It's what they've spent. They've often spent their life building this capital reserve. So when they put that money into the vision, they're putting a part of their self into the business. So
for sure,
it really, I strongly believe that early stage founders and their whole investor network, or the shareholders and the board especially, should go to group therapy. And I'm not joking, because it would, or even better, go to the mountains together and get high.
Or just we can start with the trip,
Exactly. Even just a nice afternoon, hiking in the mountains together, put in those regular expeditions into the schedule, would do wonders for the communication and the relationship internally.
Yeah, but that's crazy. It's all about trust, actually, and transparency. So, and I think we still do have in the ecosystem that unhealthy relationship between different stakeholders, where like we try to choose what do we say for whom and what, but then at the end of the day, you kind of immediately before the relationship has begun, you break the trust and break the transparency, because you still think, what should I hide? But it will be interesting to see where it's heading, actually. So we tend to, go ahead.
Sorry, just on that topic,
Please.
you've made a good point, Seville. It's I'm a firm believer and advocate for human capital. Basically, if you have the right team with limited financial resources, you can make wonders. But there does sadly seem to be this bias in venture that the financial resources, the financial capital, is the king. And that's something that it really angers me, because it shouldn't be like that. But unfortunately, from my perspective, there is this bias in the market.
There is, and I really like what you're saying. It's all about relationships, about managing that relationship. But then we kind of got instead of into collaboration. I've noticed many times that you get into the power dynamics and like the kind of who has more power instead of having equal relationship. Because one has the money, another has the product and the team and skill set. So then they go hand in hand together rather than just the money. But I can see it changing as well, actually, and I'm pretty sure that more and more you can see new venture funds approaching and appearing with a more human approach, making business more human, making kind of this whole ecosystem way more human and normalized, I would say. So
Definitely, there's a lot of I'm seeing as well. Lots of great investors, and who are genuinely, what they state online. Exactly.
They generally care, and I think more value-based, value-driven investments are out there right now, focused on impact and also founders' help, which I'm so grateful that the conversation is, it can be like very cliche, founders' help, but I'm so happy that it's happening because it's crucial to avoid such kind of miscommunication and burnouts and, good people going down spiral rather than actually going up.
Exactly, and I can tell you from experience that curing burnout is infinitely harder than preventing it. And that was, I've after 11 years in the diving industry, I was like, burnout, it's not going to affect me. And really, burnout has only really bitten me hard since September last year. Up until that point, obviously my performance was sort of like, dropping, but I'd still find that energy. But over the last 6 months, in September time, there was no tricks, no self-talk, no like inspirational memes or there was nothing I could do to get out of that rut. And it's really tough to come out of once you've gone that low. It takes a whole lot of effort to get back. I mean, to give you an idea, I told you at the beginning that I was at CrossFit this morning. I've only got back into CrossFit like 2 weeks ago. So I was training, I was doing a lot of hiking and running, but CrossFit was always my go-to exercise, and I just didn't have the desire for it up until very recently.
I'm so glad that it got back for you, the desire. Can you share with us maybe how did you recognize that, this time your burnout is way more serious than before and that you really reached the bottom in a way? And what did you do? Because when you're that low, and I've been myself through different burnouts, and one of them I had really, really, really strong. And I mean, you can go to the bottom and you're still functioning, but you're not really functioning anymore. You are just super down and there is no more inner drive or power, and you really need to put a lot of efforts. And what did you do?
It's interesting. My son has like played a big part in me, creating a better life for myself. So he was actually the catalyst when I mentioned when I left the oil and gas industry. But equally, 3 years ago, I gave up alcohol, and the big reason behind that was that, like most things in life, I can either do things at 0% or 1000%, and alcohol was no exception. So it was like a Thursday morning at 7 a.m. I hadn't been home for 48 hours, hadn't slept, and I was with a friend in a hotel room in the south of Wrocław, and I was supposed to be taking my son to kindergarten. So that was our routine. Every morning I would take him to kindergarten. And because I'd been out partying and like just going wild, I was going to miss picking him up. So it was like that moment, that like feeling inside, that guilt. At that moment it clicked. I said, I'm giving up. And from that moment on, I didn't touch alcohol. I mean, it literally went cold turkey. It was like a horrible 3 weeks, 4 weeks where, you just had that feeling to have a drink. So quit alcohol. And then coming back to your question on how did I know when I was at the deep burnout stage, up to be really like conscientious around. So he doesn't have a telephone, obviously. He's just about to be 6. but I've tried to instill in him this this knowledge that using devices, whether it's a laptop, phone, for extended periods is really bad. So he actually, he quotes like a Frank Herbert quote from the film Dune, and he always says, "Daddy, telephones are the mind killer." So there was a point like last year when I was just burnt out, just doom scrolling on my phone, sat with my son, and he'd be picking me up. So he'd be like, "Daddy, you're using your telephone too much. Come and play with me." And it was moments like that that really just struck a chord with me. And I'm like, I've told this young guy how damaging electronics can be for himself and for us in general.
Yeah.
And here I am just looking for a quick dopamine fix because I'm so burnt out that nothing makes sense. And again, just picturing him, his disappointment has been a strong support to turning things around.
That's beautiful. And then did you start changing things alone, or did you look outside for some external help?
I have been in therapy, as well as using psychedelics at least once a quarter, and that's really powerful. And then around 2 or 3 months into basically this men's only platform, and it's operated by a former Special Forces, UK Special Forces SBS guy called Gary Banford, and the platform is Duratus. Okay, so I joined that a couple of months ago, and it just put into perspective, that there's all of these, whether it's on this occasion we're talking about guys only, but there's women, there's guys going through this burnout on their entrepreneurial journey, and it really is something that affects all of us at some point, and that's the key takeaway. I think that I would like any founders or investors who are really going through burnout at the moment. I know it feels like you are alone and that nobody knows how this feels. That's something that you'll tell yourself because it makes you feel better in some ways. But the truth is, many people are going through the same stresses, the same trials. So don't feel like you're on your own, because there's people out there who you can talk to and really exchange tips with.
Totally. You're never alone, and no matter which journey you are, it can be burnout, it can be entrepreneurial, it can be motherhood, and sometimes we just go so within ourselves that we forget to remind us that there are more people out there. That's why I love the communities, right? Because there you can find the shared mindset. It just us need to be more proactive to look out for that. If you're building something, look out for someone who is building as well. If you're going through a tough time, look out there, because then we can lift each other, we can learn from each other, and then, it's always easier to go in a group, I guess, rather than fully solo,
Absolutely. I told you in Barcelona my dream vision for the platform that I want to build to gather the whole venture ecosystem. Go to the Austrian Alps for a 10-day retreat, and this is a project that's very close to my heart, and I want to bring to fruition when circumstances allow.
So I think that's a great idea, and we immediately aligned on the vibe and the future of that. I want to ask you a bit of a practical advice. You've been mentioning a lot about fast-paced environment, building stuff, breaking stuff, etc. Do you have any particular tools or strategies how to manage stress and maintain a healthy mindset through this kind of entrepreneurial journey?
Basically, it starts with setting yourself up for sleep, because nowadays, nowadays I go to bed even without melatonin, and that wouldn't have been possible 6 months or a year ago.
Congratulations!
So that's the most damaging, and I'll boldly say this is a certainty. The most damaging aspect of burnout and deep depression is not being able to sleep, because then you just get into a really vicious cycle. So everything starts with your sleeping routine. So from like 6 p.m., 7 p.m., drop the device. Don't log into your laptop. Don't use your phone. If you can, if you want to, I would highly recommend turning your phone to grayscale. So that's something that I did. I have an iPhone, and I did this around a year ago, and that's been a big game changer. But regardless of having grayscale activated, ditch the phone, and then warm shower always relaxes me well. And then by 8-9 p.m, I'll be generally reading a book or listening to an audio book. And then what I find really helps, I'll go onto YouTube just before I'm ready to drop off, and I'll find some 432 hertz music. So it's basically hippy dippy, spirituality based soundtracks, but it really works. And a lot of these tracks are 8 to 11 hours long. So I basically fast forward the track to 5 hours if it's an 8-hour track, so that it will play for 3 hours and then it will automatically stop. Otherwise, if you start from the beginning, you'll get woken up in the middle of the night when your body comes out of the deep stage and you hear the music. So basically set it so that only 3 hours plays, and then you're virtually guaranteed to get a good 8 to 9 hours sleep. And then first thing in the morning, get outside. Morning sunlight is really important.
I know, but in Baltics we have so much in the winter season.
Exactly. So, but it really sets I think it's the circadian rhythm in your body. Yeah. So get outside, even if you don't go training, go for a walk. Try to get some vigorous physical exercise in the mornings. And then one thing also that I've started practicing a lot more is take a break when you're in a stressful situation. If it's like a business related topic or a legal related topic and it's super stressful, take a 5-minute break, focus on your breath, do some really deep inhales, hold it, exhale through the nose, and try and just take a step back before you proceed. And then caffeine. So this is actually coffee. So this is only something very recently that I've done, so I can't really give you firm feedback. But last Saturday, so 5 days ago, was my last coffee, and it's been going well. Although I did notice a lot of insomnia Monday and Tuesday especially, and I was reading up on it, and that's because of when you quit caffeine, your body goes through a withdrawal process like with alcohol. And we'll see. I mean, at the moment, my heart is set on not on giving up coffee for good, but it was one of my, was one of my guilty pleasures, and we'll see how that goes over the coming weeks.
Were you drinking too much coffee, or it was just causing an anxiety?
As I said, with like most things in life, it's either 0 or 1,000%. Okay. So I'm like a 8 coffee.
Oh, okay. You were abusing it. I'm a fan of coffee. Actually, I gave up coffee last year for quite a few. It was really insane to become so aware, and your nerve system is just like super sensitive in a good way, alert, very calm. I really enjoyed it, but I've got back now to coffee, and I'm also in this kind of a bit of a slow transition, getting towards taking a break of it. But yeah, complicated.
Exactly what I noticed. I mean, I would have huge energy for a short burst, and then the caffeine crash would come, and I'd be useless for a few hours. So I feel much better in myself. And actually, cool. I'll grab something I want to show you. Okay, on this topic.
Awesome. What are you having here?
Essentially, the most terrifying thing.
Oh, the mushroom coffee. I know.
Yeah. No, it's not mushroom coffee.
It's complex. Okay.
It's complex, yeah. So, besides losing my son at a festival, not having these in stock terrifies me.
Okay.
So I'm like religious about taking these super mushroom complex now. So to be clear, these are the natural. They're not psychedelic.
Yeah.
But the
Lion Mate and all those popular nows, right?
Exactly. But so they do wonders.
Really? How long have you been taking them, and what kind of wonders have you noticed?
So I've been taking these for about 18 months.
That's a long time.
Yeah, 2 days ago though, I ran out about 4 weeks ago, and I just 2 days ago received my new package
Batch.
from the UK. So I'm front loading the tablets, so I'm taking double the recommended daily dose for like a
Oh,
week.
seriously? Oh my
Yeah,
God, you,
I just
you
want
crazy.
I just want the benefits back from the
That sounds
shrooms. And
crazy. Don't you think it's also a bit like the benefits don't run away that fast? Maybe it's also like you got into the habit of it. It's been 18 months.
exactly. I mean, yeah, I'm sure that the full benefits didn't disappear after a month without
Sure
them, but
not. Yes.
it may be just my imagination, but I can feel the benefits even after the last
Okay.
3 days.
Our mind is a powerful tool, actually. So I really like what you're saying about this coffee and awareness and alcohol, because I think sometimes the small changes to just get your mind sharper, to feel more calm and more present, it's just giving away like such simple things as toxins like alcohol, coffee, processed foods, and bringing back sleep. I like where the new generation is going and how everyone starts talking how important is sleep. And one thing what I've noticed with the melatonin, well, like some social media trends, it became such a overused sleeping drug, I would say, that but nobody talks about that it takes actually your sleeping hormone from the future. So you're feeling good now, but you're not gonna really feel in the future that good. So it's not gonna solve the problem at the end of the day, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and it's I I feel that the audio, the 432 hertz music is a
Uh-huh.
really, there's no melatonin involved. It sends me off to sleep very well. So
The beats and the music and the frequencies actually really does help to retrain, rewire your brain. I have one more question for you before we're getting closer to the end. You've mentioned a bit um, some practices, some kind of rituals, and also spirituality. And everybody is talking right now about that. So, what would be your definition, and what's for you the meaning of spiritual guidance and spirituality?
so yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that I ponder an awful lot, especially when I'm in the mountains after psilocybin. And I really think it's just acceptance of any circumstance that you find yourself in, and maintaining that, your authentic self. When there's stressful moments hitting you, if you can stay true to your authentic self, then for me that's the spiritual component of yeah. So my understanding of it is that you'll reach a point in your life with from varying amounts of stress and life circumstances, that the only logical route forward is just to accept it, and the different circumstances can be varying in how traumatic or stressful they are, but you're going to get back to the same point where you've just you can either choose to hold that anger and get bitter and basically outsource all of your anger and bitterness to those around you, or you can take the very hard path of accepting it. It's not easy, and I'm not preaching that I'm that I'm a monk, but I've definitely, over the last few years, I've become a lot better a lot better at accepting circumstances and making peace with it.
Okay, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing your approach. Do you think that this mindful approach towards life for you was one of the key pillars that helped you with all the transitions in life you've done so far when it comes to your career and getting out there with either new role or new product or kind of pivoting?
Yeah, I would have to say yes. Plus, I also have, since childhood, I just have an intense curiosity. So back when I went backpacking, it was like this burning desire to experience other cultures. So I think curiosity is like a big part of it. And then just I appreciate diverse opinions and broad perspectives. There's so much. I recall a time actually, just when I got into the diving industry, and I was at a hotel just before going to the job in Dubai, and it was in the Dubai area. I'm not sure if you've ever been to Dubai,
Not
but
yet.
there was I had some laundry to do, so I had some clothes that needed to be washed. And I went to a local shop down the street, and there was a group of 2 or 3 Pakistani guys, and they had a laundromat and an ironing service place. And I got talking to them, and their life stories and their experiences were just mind-boggling, and so different to what I had ever experienced. And I was like, so where do you guys live? And they like raised their hands and they said, oh, this is our bed. And the ironing boards where they ironed people's clothes were their beds as well. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like, oh my goodness. So I went to the job. When I came back, I made sure to come and see them, got some traditional Pakistani sweets, and we had a really good conversation. So
That's crazy. So for someone out there right now who's listening for our episode, what would be your recommendation how to get that product, startup, that idea out there in the market? What would be your some action steps, or where do you begin actually the change? Or
So the change starts with yourself. If you want to build a killer product and if you want to get it out to the market quickly and efficiently, you're not going to do it if you've slept 2 hours last night, if your diet's crap, if your team aren't aligned with where you're taking the business. So really focus on the root of the business, which is you, but also your immediate team. Almost to be militant about maintaining balance in yourself and in your close environment.
Very well said. So, we're approaching to the end of this episode, and I have this small tradition. So I ask all my guests to leave this podcast with a question for all of us to ponder during the day. Is there anything you would like to put out there so we can think through after we are done with the episode?
What is the most precious resource in the universe?
I'm dropping the mic. Mike, I'm dropping the mic.
Something else?
Amazing, beautiful. No, I think I cannot answer as well. I need to think about it. And I will be thinking until we launch this episode live.
But I can ask something else.
Please, yeah, sure. No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I think it's great. That's what I want to bring out here with us being here chatting, having opportunity to spread the word outside for the people who are out there looking for inspiring stories and some kind of guidance. I think it's a beautiful question to ponder on and to a bit step back and reflect. So thank you so much for the question. Okay. Is there any final things you would like to share before we close up?
No, it's been amazing. Thank you so much, Seville. It was a beautiful conversation.
Mutual. Thank you so much for joining and being so open and sharing your story through very non-conventional way of living lives, having the courage. It was a big honor to have you here, and I can't wait to see your upcoming years now with new pivots, new changes. And thank you everyone who joined us today. We had Michael Chatte. How?
That's good.
Please pronounce it right. Chaffe. Okay, good.
So Chaffe.
Chaffe. Okay, well, almost. Okay, so we had Michael Chatte today in our episode. We discussed from resilience to founder's mindset to burnouts to career changes, etc. I hope you enjoyed, and we had the question there on Spotify Q&A section, so you can ponder during the day, and also all the links where you can follow Michael and his adventures. So thank you everyone for joining us today.